What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com.
Here are my DFS picks for MLB playoffs Sunday, October 18th.
These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button
And hit that bell icon
so you don't miss our new videos.
In this video, I'm going to go over my top picks for today's MLB slate. And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made. Okay guys, MLB playoffs. Let's take a look at this MLB showdown between the Atlanta Braves and the Los Angeles Dodgers. So at the pitcher position, I like Tony Gonzalez with a 10% pitching advantage over the Atlanta Braves. Tony Gonzalez, he's pitching 10% better versus righty batters, only giving up a .550 OPS versus righties. And he's facing 6 righties here tonight. On top of that, the Braves have only hit 4 of his last 25 pitches, batting a .160 batting average. It's a somewhat small sample size, but the splits are great there, and he's $10,600 DraftKings salary and the same price on FanDuel. He has an ERA of 2.31. His record is 2-2 on the season, pitching an average of 78 pitches per game, averaging 17 fantasy points per game. He scored 10, 17, and 25 DraftKings points in the last 3 games, projected at 17.1 DraftKings points here tonight. So I like Tony Gonzalez here versus the Atlanta Braves. Okay, let's take a look at the catcher position. I like Will Smith with a 56% batting advantage over Ian Anderson. Will Smith bats 25% better versus righty pitchers. He's batting a 1.024 OPS versus righties. And Ian Anderson, he pitches his worst ball versus righty batters, 30% worse than his pitch to lefties, giving up a .601 OPS versus righties. Now, Will Smith is 0 for 2 versus Anderson. It's a small sample size, and he's only $7,800 DraftKings salary and $1,800 less on FanDuel. He's averaging 8 fantasy points per game on the season, and he scored 3, 18, and 0 fantasy points in the last 3 games, projected at 10.2 fantasy points here tonight. So I like Will Smith here versus Ian Anderson. Okay, who do we have at the first base position? I like Freddie Freeman with a 20% batting advantage over Tony Gonzalez. Freddie Freeman is batting 34% better versus righty pitchers. He's batting a 1.114 OPS versus righties. And Tony Gonzalez, he does pitch his best ball versus lefties, giving up a .475 OPS versus lefties. But Freddie Freeman is 1 for 4. He has a 1.250 OPS versus Gonzalez because that one hit was for a home run. He's $9,400 DraftKings salary and $400 less on FanDuel. He's averaging 11 fantasy points per game on the season, and he scored 3, 14, and 14 fantasy points in the last 3 games, projected at 12.6 fantasy points here tonight. So I like Freddie Freeman here versus Tony Gonzalez. Okay, at the second base position, I like Ozzie Albies with a 43% batting advantage over Tony Gonzalez. Ozzie Albies is batting a little bit better versus righty batters, batting a .814 OPS versus righties. And Tony Gonzalez, he throws his worst ball to switch hitters, 41% worse than his other pitches, giving up a .870 OPS versus switch hitters. Albies is 1 for 4, batting .250 with a .5 OPS versus Gonzalez. He's 8,200 DraftKings salary and 2,200 less on FanDuel. He's averaging 9 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 3, 0, and 8 fantasy points in the last 3 games, projected at 10.2 fantasy points here tonight. So I like Aussie Albies here versus Tony Gonzalez.
Real quick, guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. The tools are all about saving research time. You can see the last 3 games, the fantasy points per game, the targets they got per game, so you can see how involved they are in the offense, the rushes they got per game. Seeing all this stuff on one screen helps you save time and make better picks. Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups.
Okay, let's take a look at the third base position. I like Justin Turner with a 35% batting advantage over Ian Anderson. Justin Turner bats 4% better versus righty pitchers. He's batting a .872 OPS versus righties. And Ian Anderson, he pitches his worst ball versus righty batters, giving up a .601 OPS versus righties. Turner is 1 for 2 with a 1 OPS versus Anderson. He's 8,000 DraftKings salary and 1,000 less on FanDuel, averaging 8 fantasy points per game on the season, scoring 16, 7, and 10 fantasy points in the last 3 games, projected at 10.4 fantasy points here tonight. So I like Justin Turner here versus Ian Anderson. Okay, and at the shortstop position, I like Dansby Swanson with a 32% batting advantage over Tony Gonzalez. Dansby Swanson is batting 18% better versus righty pitchers. He's batting a .802 OPS versus righties. And Tony Gonzalez, he's giving up a .550 OPS versus righties. Swanson is 0 for 2 versus Gonzalez, and he's 7,400 DraftKings salary and 900 less on FanDuel. He's averaging 9 fantasy points per game on the season, and he scored 14, 9, and 11 fantasy points in the last 3 games, projected at 9.6 fantasy points here tonight. So I like Dansby Swanson here versus Tony Gonzalez. Okay, moving on to the outfield position. I'm not sure if I'm going to play a pitcher in my lineup here tonight because I want to save some salary so I can fit in Mookie Betts with a 62% batting advantage over Ian Anderson. Mookie Betts is batting 32% better versus righty pitchers. He's batting a 1.004 OPS versus righties. And Ian Anderson throws his worst ball versus righty batters, 30% worse than his pitch to lefties, giving up a .601 OPS versus righties. There's no at-bats versus Anderson yet, and Mookie Betts is 9,600 DraftKings salary and 1,100 less on FanDuel. He's averaging 11 fantasy points per game on the season, and he scored 5, 15, and 0 fantasy points in the last 3 games, projected at 11.8 fantasy points here tonight. So I like Mookie Betts here versus Ian Anderson.
If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video or just go to draftdashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for this MLB slate. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again, and good luck.